Good morning and welcome to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell. While various products may be discussed during the course of this program, please note that these discussions are intended only to educate you about financial topics. They are broad in scope and do not consider your individual personal financial situation. You should work with a qualified financial professional in collaboration with your attorney and tax advisor before implementing any financial decisions which will affect your personal financial situation. Thrivent financial representatives cannot provide legal or tax advice. Your local Thrivent representatives are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. And now, Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell.
Well, good day. How are ya?
I'm great. Kristen, how are you doing today?
I am really good.
What a wild week we have had on the markets. And you know, all week long, I've been looking at these markets and these wild swings, 400 up, 400 down, 400 up. You know, I mean, it's just been absolutely crazy. And I've been telling people, you know, you aren't going to believe this, but I've got Doug Lennox on my show this week. And that is just complete serendipity to have you, Doug, on the show this morning after these crazy wild swings and really talk about behavioral finance and what we should do. So first of all, let me introduce Doug Lennox. Thanks for being on the show with us here, Doug.
My pleasure. I'm glad I could make the market move up and down a little bit this week. So
we get great timing for
I
the
staged
show.
A lot of volatility just for
well done.
Yes.
Well done. Exactly.
Yes.
We're delighted to have you on the show. You know, I've known Doug for probably 25 years or more. And you know, I'm grateful for you to be on the show, but I also have seen firsthand the impact that you've had on so many people's lives. Doug is one of these people who, you know, very frankly, comes up by being so fascinated in studying human behavior that he comes up with some of these profound findings that I think just resonate with you. When you hear them, you often say, that is so true. I've seen it so many times in people because he studies human behavior so much, and he's used it to lead organizations to great heights. He's used it as part of the building blocks for his books, for his talks. And you know, he's internationally recognized, so we are absolutely delighted and grateful that he's going to share some of his wisdom this morning with us and with our listeners.
With our listeners, absolutely.
Exactly. So, Doug, let's start. Tell us just a little bit about your background. You've got some humble beginnings. You're from a small town here in Minnesota, and I think people might be interested in that.
Well, I actually was born in North Dakota, speaking of small towns, so, and I still have a little farm out there in western North Dakota that I rent out. I'm actually not an able farmer. However, I went to high school in Redwood Falls, Minnesota, and then went to college, University of Minnesota Morris. So we've got some Morris people.
Yeah, we've got Morris people listening here today.
I'm sure we have some Redwood Falls listeners as well.
Listening here.
Yeah, yes. So very exciting. I actually graduated from college at Morris eventually.
And you were the commencement speaker there last year, I believe.
This year,
this
May.
This last graduation.
Yeah. However, I misread the fine print. I started college in 1970, and I thought it was a 40-year degree. And I finished a year early, but it was actually a 4-year degree, and so I didn't graduate till 2 years ago. And then,
wow!
So here you have it.
Yeah.
So it took me a little while.
It took you a little while. Fantastic.
Yes.
But in the meantime, you've really led thousands of people, really in mostly financial services industry, and now doing consulting with Lennox Aberman. Tell us just a little bit about Lennox Aberman.
Well, we work in sports and business and nonprofits, and so our focus is dealing with a couple questions. Why do people do what they do? And is it possible that someone could really be who they would ideally like to be more often? And we do that literally in every discipline. So it's global. So, you know, for Minnesota sports fans, Rick Aberman is a sports psychologist. He was actually, I saw in yesterday's newspaper, I was flying back from Boston. I had a speaking engagement out there on Thursday, and I was flying back yesterday morning reading my Kindle and reading about Rick Aberman. So we work with, there was an article, people read the Star Trib yesterday, was referencing Rick's work with the Minnesota Twins. We work with the Vikings, who,
Sure.
and the Gophers, women and men. And so Rick does that, and we do a lot of work in the nonprofit space. Judy Skoglund does most of that work, and
Very nice.
I'm a kind of the for-profit world guy. you know,
Right.
I
right.
believe in making money, making a difference.
Absolutely, and you've made so much difference in so many lives. And when we think about why do people do what they do, you started with this fascination here a few years ago on why do people what they do with money.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's a complicated answer. The answer to the second question, which we also narrowed down for the financial question, is it possible one could be a better decision maker with and about money? The answer to that one is yes, but the answer to the first question, which you asked me, is more problematic. And in order to answer it, we actually integrate three disciplines. And I believe in profound simplicity. There's three levels of understanding. You have simplistic, you've got complex, and then you have profound simplicity. And if you can't get to profound simplicity, it's not very useful. So I'll just mention the complications. I complify things. I make up words. So I can complify stuff if necessary. Right. But we integrate three disciplines: traditional finance, behavioral finance, and neuroscience.
Right.
So, and each of those you can get very deep and complicated, but traditional finance, as you know, has been grounded really in Nobel Prize winning theory. So the theory was authored in 1952 by a guy named Harry Markowitz. He won the Nobel Prize for it in 1990. He's still alive. He actually teaches. He left Stanford a few years ago, and he's now in San Diego. But he still teaches. His own point of view on his own theory is kind of, after all, it was just a theory. I paraphrase. But
Right.
Behavioral finance is the psychology of money, and then neuroscience deals with the brain. And the mind operates in the brain. That's the psychology, and the brain is the instrument, so metaphorically.
Very good. That's quite a bit right there. But that's,
it is
hang
a
on,
lot.
Hang on, listeners, here, because we're going to get to the simple here.
Yeah, right.
Well, just listening to this part of this and knowing that most of my adult life, where I am starting to save for retirement, the stock market has been up, down, and very extreme, and it does make my head spin. So, what is exactly going inside a person's brain when they face these financial decisions? Because it scares me.
Well, and that's interesting. You use the word scared. The thing about the brain, the human brain is hardwired to avoid danger, and it's hardwired to pursue opportunity. The wiring is actually triggered by the emotions we experience as stimulated by some outside event. So if something happens outside of you that scares you, like market volatility, that will activate the danger system. If something happens that excites you, what Greenspan called the irrational exuberance in the 90s, where we had the dot-com explosion and everything was going up, that will activate the opportunity system. And the way the brain works, the biology of this is when one of those systems is turned on, it disables the other. And so when the danger system is turned on, it disables your ability to see opportunity. And what we talk about when we get into emotional intelligence is it's real. Number one, it's real. It's not cognitive, but it's real. It sacrifices accuracy for speed. So our emotional intelligence is very fast and frequently wrong.
Right.
And just when it comes to money, just to make it really simple, our emotional intelligence cannot actually tell the difference between a bear market and a bear in the woods. So both will scare you,
Right.
and that gets us into sometimes a fight or flight thing, and you don't fight the market, you don't fight the bear, you run. And that's an irrational response from both the bear in the woods and a bear market.
Wow. It's interesting because I like to, when I do some seminars myself, I tell the story about my confrontation with the real bear.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And,
did it scare you?
Oh, it scared me terribly.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, in the back, the reel that was playing in my mind the whole time was I was up in the Boundary Waters, and the reel was the video they show you before you go into the Boundary Waters that says, do not run from the bear. Make yourself tall and big and
Yes.
pound the pots and pans over your head, or in some fashion make a lot of noise. Well, this was a schooled bear. He knew the system, wasn't afraid of this. And so when I pounded the pots and pans, and I said to my son at one point in time, I know why the bear isn't afraid of us. We're not close enough. So we took a step closer. The bear turned towards us. It was climbing down the tree where our pack was, and did this huff huff thing, okay? And my son, who, graduated from Morris, as you did, by the way.
Before me, though.
Before, it's true, it's true.
He read the real print. It
Exactly.
was a four-year degree.
But he majored in English, and so he's the writer of the family, and so he journaled this later. And to your very story here, in his journal, he said, when the bear turned and did the huff huff, my dad scampered off like a deer. Well, it's a little embellished because I didn't completely leave him there. But
you didn't run like a deer.
I didn't run like a deer, but I ran quickly, So we know exactly what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about, you're getting a little bit into what is inside the brain. And I know, Doug, you have a recipe that you use actually in at least one of your books. I think you have 5 or 6 books out now.
5.
5 books out now. And I know your recipe starts with 1 principle, 2 rules, and 4 skills. So, we may come back to this, but let's get into it right now, because when the brain starts to give you these particular messages, we are not helpless.
No, we are not helpless. And that's absolutely true. And the 4 skills will help us deal with that. What happens, by the way, when most of what we do as people, we do because we did. We're more creatures of habit than anything else.
Sure.
And Dan Goleman coined this term years ago called the amygdala hijack. That's the emotional brain hijacking the cognitive brain, or
Right.
the rational center. Well, Jeff Schwartz was able to prove that when that happens, the default is to our habits.
Right.
And so the opportunity is to build productive habits to deal with this. But the book you are referring to, since you mentioned it, I'll go ahead
Sure.
and plug it. It's called Financial Intelligence: How to Make Smart, Values-Based Decisions with Your Money in Your Life. And the principle is the principle of responsibility, which is a difficult principle. I think I'm talking to the right audience, though, because having grown up in rural America, it's a responsible group of people I'm speaking
Absolutely.
with. But the world is moving away from wanting to accept responsibility.
And moving to a situation of blame.
Oh yeah,
Somebody else's fault.
Well, that
Right.
makes at least somebody's responsible, and it won't be me.
It won't be me, right?
That's exactly right. And I'm saying the opposite, actually. So we have to take responsibility for the choices we make. So the principle is the principle of responsibility. We also have a responsibility to serve others, and there's a whole bunch of things that come into responsibility. The 2 rules, and this gets into dealing with money. Rule number 1 is always prepare for the certainty of uncertainty.
Certainty of uncertainty.
Absolutely. And I would think almost everybody out there is increasingly confident they don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
And that's a good thing. And so we have to get ready for this uncertainty. Rule 2 is always make your financial decisions after first reflecting on your values, what you really care about.
Right.
Now, what's interesting about values reflection is it doesn't make us smarter, but it calms the emotional center and improves our access to how smart we are.
Right.
So I can't raise the IQ of our listeners, but I can help people improve access to the IQ they got.
Right.
And that's
Cool.
the 4 skills: recognize, reflect, reframe, respond.
Wonderful. And we're going to go deeper into that in just a minute. But to my bear story and what you just said is that after fleeing a little bit from the actual bear, I was faced with a moral dilemma. The moral dilemma was my son was 20 feet closer to that bear than I was, and I couldn't have that. So stay tuned for the rest of the story
There you go.
here in just a minute. But for all our listeners, make sure you listen throughout the show today, because Doug mentioned his book, Financial Intelligence, and we're going to give you an opportunity to get that book for free. This is a $25 book, by the way.
This is a great opportunity.
And we're gonna send that out in each one of the locations. So hang on today, because that opportunity is coming up. Okay.
All right, we'll be back.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Welcome back. You know, we were just talking about these 4 R's. They were recognize, reflect, refrain, and respond. How can an individual investor use these?
Well, the great question. Thank you, because I did kind of blow by those really fast. So the first skill, and by the way the brain works is practice makes permanent. So if everybody could imagine the brain being their lawn, if you walk across the lawn the same place over and over again, back and forth, eventually there will be a path there.
Right.
In the brain, that's called a neural circuit. Practice makes permanent. Practice does not make perfect.
Right.
Therefore, what we want to do is establish some habits, permanent habits, which is what a habit
Sure.
is,
Right.
and make them adaptive relative to financial decision making and other decision
Now, I
making.
would assume making sure they're the right habits.
Exactly. And the first of which is the habit of recognition. And this is simply practicing paying attention to oneself. Most people are not good at this. And so the recognition habit, we call this the freeze game. So I recommend to all our listeners that they begin practicing today. If this is the one thing you get out of this session today, you will in fact it will change your life. There's no question about it. So and it's just this skill. Hit the pause button multiple times today,
Yeah.
and just ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? How am I feeling emotionally right now? And what am I doing right now?
Right.
Now, most people don't realize how often their mind wanders. So, I'm guessing some of our listeners right now,
Right.
I mean, if they're married couples, and we've all learned how to pretend to listen to somebody. We nod, we smile, we do
Right.
that little deal, and
Then
then
we're reading the newspaper.
yeah, and then an odd look comes over the person who was talking with us, and we think, my nod and my smile is probably inappropriate for whatever it was she said. I wonder what she said.
Right.
Moreover, I wonder when I quit listening. So we often don't even know. Or
Right.
we read a book, we get to the end of a chapter and go, what the heck was I just reading?
Yeah.
Well, the second one is even more weird than the first, because that's reading to yourself and not paying attention.
Right.
That's because we haven't made paying attention to ourselves a habit.
Right.
And so our minds wander, we don't know it. So if you just practice paying attention to yourself, that's your real self, then you can move to the second R, which is to reflect. And reflect on your ideal self. That's the values. So
Right.
rule 2, always
Fantastic.
reflect on your values before making a decision. And so rule 2 is reflect. And so values, mine happen to be family, happiness, wisdom, integrity, service, health. And I reflect on those multiple times every day. I recommend people put verbs in front of them, love your family, be happy, etc.,
Right.
which is the process I go through multiple times every day. I want to make values-based decision-making a habit. I don't want to do it. I don't want to hope I do the right thing at the right time, the moral dilemma.
Right.
I don't want to hope that I do. I want to do it as a habit. And that process engages the rational brain, calms the emotional center, doesn't make us smarter, but makes us more rational. And then the third habit is to reframe. Reframe is just change your mind. I still do quote Aristotle, but nobody reads Aristotle, so I shifted to Winnie the Pooh. And Winnie once said, look down, and he looked down and he noticed he didn't like his shirt. I looked down and, I don't like my shirt. So he decided to change his mind so he wouldn't have to change his shirt. That's reframing.
Right.
So, I was going to do something stupid, and I decided to change my mind. I was going to run from the bear. I decided to change my mind.
Right.
I was going to run from the bear market. I decided to change my mind. And respond is just the practice of actually then making a decision, taking an action.
Right. Wow. It's fantastic stuff when you actually think about, what we feel like, and I hate to use the term, overrules us at times, what they call the hijack.
Yes.
Where you're like afterwards, we've all been hijacked.
Sure.
There's not a human being that I know of that hasn't had that hijack where afterwards they've said to themselves, why did I get so emotional? Why did I get so angry? Or what was going on?
And then why did I behave so stupidly?
Right.
Yes.
No,
That's
absolutely.
what so most of us have achieved being anger and then achieved stupidness right after
Right,
that.
exactly. To
So
reflect.
anger's stupid. And
Reflecting after the fact.
right.
Yeah.
And so it begs the question, when I'm angry, must I be stupid, or is stupid optional? And the answer is stupid is optional. So
Right.
when one is angry, they don't have to behave stupidly.
Right.
When one is scared, they don't have to run from the market. And if we get prepared, if we actually engage in what we call the smart money philosophy,
Yep.
then every listener out there can go to bed every night knowing that no matter what happens, if my family needs money in the morning, if I die overnight, or if something happens to the markets overnight, the smart money philosophy just prepares us for the truth, which is uncertainty. So
Okay.
that whenever I need money, I should have a smart place to get it. And that's different than trying to put all of my money in the smartest possible place. So as we talk about market volatility, the markets go up and they go down, obviously, and not every day is a good day to take money out of the market.
Right.
The reason investments work better than investors is people move in and out at the wrong time because they aren't prepared for uncertainty. They get emotional. They make emotional decisions.
Well, and Doug, you and I have shared this in the past, but the Dalbar market research, I can't remember the exact period of time. It's from some date in the 70s to some date in the 80s. And
Well, we get it every year. I
Right.
get it every year, and it's a 20. They do 1 year, 5 year, 20 years,
Right.
so forth. And so the one that just ended December 31st, 2010. So that's the most recent one.
Yep.
So it's the 2011 study. The average equity investor over that period of time did slightly better, equity mutual fund investor, slightly better than 3.8% per year.
They did 3.8, and what did the markets do at the same time?
Market did 9.14.
Okay.
So there is a pretty big gap there.
Yeah.
Every year, and it demonstrates that investments work, investors don't.
Yeah, I'm going to
And
say
this-
that again so people capture it. Investments work.
Investments work, investors don't.
Investors don't.
No.
And the reason is,
Emotions. Same
Yeah.
thing, by the way, with the bonds. So over that 20-year period of time, the Barclay Bond Index was up by 6.8%, but the average bond investor actually fixed income investor only did 1.01.
Wow.
So what happens is people, and you're seeing it now, as when the markets get hurt, people flee from the market and they flee to safety. And then when things get it going again, they get back in. And one of the guys who actually kindly endorsed my book, Ted Truscott, has this great quote that I use, so I give him attribution. But he says, when the thing about the market is when you have the price, you don't have the proof, and when you have the proof, you don't have the price.
Right.
In other words, people want evidence that it's good to be in the market.
Yep.
The evidence is the market will have already gone up.
Yep.
So it now looks like a good thing to be in, but I missed it.
Yes. This morning's Star and Tribune had an article, and it was like 6 things that you should know before you invest, and it was all relative to the market volatility. And knowing you were on the air and thinking about what we're going to be talking about this morning, I approached this article with kind of a smile, because I was pretty certain that I was going to read things, and this is what I read, They talked about price earnings ratio. They
Right.
talked about what the market does, how deep a bull market could be. What qualifies a bull market? Are we
Well, a bear market.
Bear market,
Yeah,
excuse
it's
me.
got to go down 20%. So we're
20%.
not in a bear yet.
Right, what qualifies bear market, exactly. So he was talking about this, and as I was approaching this article, I thought to myself, what of the 6 things that you should know before you invest, the number one thing you've already talked about, know yourself.
Right.
And that, of course, wasn't in the article at all.
Right. Well, that is the number one thing. And in fact, it's the first domino in everything.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what discipline we're in. So if Rick's working with a, professional baseball pitcher, that pitcher has to learn to pay attention to himself. And the whole opportunity is to get in the moment.
Yes.
And that sounds trite, but it is very difficult to do. So people often, if you're feeling guilty, you're probably mentally in the past. If you're feeling anxious, you're probably mentally in the future. So the opportunity is to get mentally in the moment. And that's very hard to do.
Sure. Fantastic. I want to go one step deeper on the recognition piece as well, because when we talk about recognition, one of the things that you said, and one of the 3 things that you mentioned there, is know what you're doing.
Yes.
And you
know the look on your face.
Exactly.
Know everything.
That's the thing I was going to say, is
Yes.
that you taught me years ago, and
Yes.
it's very hard to practice. Know, the way Doug said it was, know what your face is saying.
Yes.
Know what your face is saying. And I discovered when I went down that path that often my face was saying something very different than what I was.
Yeah.
Or what
Right.
that my words were.
Right. I once had a conversation with one of the CEOs that I worked with, and very intense individual, and he looked angry most of the time. And
I know what you're talking about.
I actually asked him, I said, a lot of people are asking me how you're doing, and I tell him you're doing fine, but I just thought I'd check. And he said, I'm doing fine. I said, would you mind telling your face?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Well, and that same CEO, by the way, had sort of a grumbly voice about him. So you actually really thought he hated your ideas most of the time,
Yeah.
but he didn't.
No,
he didn't necessarily
that's
hate
right.
them at
That's
all.
right. He
But,
just needed to do a little Winnie the Pooh.
and, Doug, considering, really what's happened in the markets here recently, you teed up a little bit about the smart money philosophy.
Yes.
Can you just give us a little bit more so we have a complete understanding? What is the smart money philosophy?
Smart money philosophy says, by the way, we can't get prepared really for the emotions. We can't determine how we're going to feel. All we can do is determine how we will react to how we feel. So we don't get to choose our emotions.
No.
And so things are going to happen. They're going to make us feel emotional. So the smart money philosophy won't make us feel better when a loved one dies suddenly.
Right.
The smart money philosophy will just make us prepared financially for that. That's all. So when it comes to uncertainty, the things that have financial implications include the length of life.
Right.
So a really long life has financial implications. It's more expensive.
Yes.
A really short life,
would be cheaper.
yeah, and a really short life has financial implications.
Absolutely.
So somebody, my mother died as a result of a car accident. Some of our listeners know my mom or knew my mom.
Right.
And that was in 1996. On the way to church in the morning, dead that evening. That had financial implications. She still had a job. Her children were growing, but nonetheless, it still had some consequences. My dad survived that accident and just died 2 years ago, approaching age 85. His last several years, he was in an assisted living facility in Redwood Falls. And that had financial implications.
Of course it did.
So the length of life has financial implications. The health status of life. So we either get blessed and are healthy all our lives, or sometimes, and more often than not, our good health is interrupted at times with sickness, injury, and sometimes it's more prolonged, and therefore it might involve long-term needs. And then, of course, the markets and the economy themselves. So the economy is either going to be good or it's not, somewhere on that teeter-totter. So I can get ready for a long life, a short life, a healthy life, a life that's not healthy, good times and bad times. And if I'm ready for those things, I've profoundly simply prepared myself for the certainty of uncertainty.
Fantastic. We're here with Doug Lennick. We're going to take a little bit of break and come back to Doug, but I want you to hang on because we've got an offer coming up and a lot more of these profoundly simple words of wisdom. Thank you so much for being here.
We'll be right back.
Nearly 3 million members look to Thrivent Financial for Lutherans to help them achieve their financial goal. Nearly 3 million people know that Thrivent Financial is committed to excellence in financial services and caring for others. Get to know Thrivent Financial and the quality of products and services they can offer you. In West Central Minnesota, your representatives to help you with your financial needs are Wayne Grunkley and Alan Sogstead, 215 Atlantic Avenue, Morris. Call 589-1731. Registered representatives for securities offered through Thrivent Investment Management Incorporated, member FINRA and SIPC.
Welcome back. You are listening to Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell, and in the house we have guest Doug Lennox.
Absolutely, and Doug, again, thank you so much for joining us. Doug, of course, is the author of many books, and I have to say just a little bit about our free offer today, because one of his 5 books is called Financial Intelligence, and we are offering today for the first 3 people that call in to that number. I'm going to give you the number one more time. It is 1-855-346-4332. Again, that's 1-855-346-4332. At each one of these locations, whether you're listening to Montevideo, Thief River Falls, Morris, Hutchinson, Woolmer, New Ulm, or New Prague. And of course, you don't have to live in those communities because there's a lot of outlying communities that are listening to us, but that's where their station is located. The first 3 callers are going to get a copy of Doug's book, Financial Intelligence. That it's actually $24.95, $25 value, and we're going to ship it out to them in the course of this next week. So call right now to make sure you're one of those 3 callers, and please do something different today, and that is tell us which station you're listening to so that we don't end up sending 6 or 7 books to one area and another area doesn't get any at all. So please just say the name of the town or the call letters of the station you're listening to so that we can get you that free book. Remember, please, to leave us your name and your address so that we have a mailing address. And it's also helpful to leave us your phone number, frankly, in case we have to confirm the address and don't get it right. So thank you for listening here this morning. Let's go back to Doug Lennox here, and we're talking behavioral finance. By the way, everyone who calls is going to get a booklet that we have published at Thrivent Financial. It's a short booklet called Behavioral Finance. Understanding the human side of investing can lead to better decisions.
There you go.
There we go, and that's exactly what we are talking about here today. So, at any rate, Doug has been walking us through the smart money model.
And we've been talking about the different implications that can affect our lives with that.
Well, in fact, you mentioned that, Kristen. I would just say that although we're talking about money today, what we're really talking about is life, and it's really about decision making.
Right.
And and the key factor in everyone's life is really the decisions they make. And so if we think about effective decision making is a function of self-awareness. That's why so if I'm aware of the real and I'm aware of the ideal, then I can make a decision. I do get to decide what to think. I do get to decide what to do. And one of the points we make is effective relationships with either people or money. So effective relationships with people or money is a function of effective management of oneself. Right. Effective management of oneself is a function of effective decision-making, and effective decision-making is a function of self-awareness. And that's the chain. Now, the grade of course in that chain is people who lack self-awareness of course, do not know.
Right,
Well,
right,
exactly.
And I can, just one other thing I want to add to what Doug said there is because I have benefited for years from my association from Doug and from his leadership. And one of the things that I interpreted years ago from what he talks about, this decision-making model, is something I've called decide in advance. And decide in advance works like this. People use it all the time. They just don't necessarily know they're using it. So, for instance, if you are going to a party and you know that there's going to be a profuse amount of alcohol at the party, deciding in advance says, well, I'm only going to have 2 drinks tonight, and I'm going to make myself that promise on that decision. What does that mean? That means that when I am in a weakened state, I'm not making this decision. I made it before, right? And it works beautifully.
You're planning ahead.
Decide in advance says that when my alarm goes off at 6:15, there will be no discussion about whether I'm going to get up and run. I'm going to get up and run. I'm not going to have that conversation because when I'm sleepy and tired, that's not the time to have it. And to the finances. Decide in advance says that, okay, I know that the markets are going to fluctuate. That's part of the certainty of uncertainty. I don't know which way, but they're going to fluctuate. And I can decide in advance by setting up the right kind of model that says that if I do not need, and I shouldn't have money that I need in the next 2 years in a fluctuating investment anyway, so knowing the comprehensive view that I have of having my cash reserve, having an income bucket, having a growth bucket, having them appropriately invested, I can decide in advance that if the market falls by a dramatic amount, that I can look back at what I've got and know I don't have to do anything rash like sell. So it's a change of words,
Yes.
maybe, but it's
absolutely.
making the decision in advance of the event, and it's really using your model, Doug. So I appreciate that greatly.
Well, no, absolutely. And with all of that, Doug, what would the role of a financial advisor be in this process?
Well, first of all, that's a really great question, Kristen. The role of the advisor is to, in fact, help the client stay into a smart money philosophy. That doesn't mean help the client stay in the market. That just means help the clients stay in the smart money philosophy. Be prepared for everything,
right,
so that you're always ready. Now, I will say one other thing. Research has indicated, and those who read the book will see this, there's actually a chapter 9 in the book is called Calling in the Experts. And in there, I actually give the reader 10 questions to ask a candidate to be their financial advisor. So one considering retaining a financial advisor should think of themselves as the CEO of their family financial affairs. And they should think of the advisor as a candidate to be the CFO. So
Sure.
You're interviewing someone to be your chief financial officer.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the research that exists shows, and this research was done by the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations. Ridiculously long name, but these are credentialed behavioral experts. And the research was sponsored by Ameriprise, done by them. Our company coordinated that research and just helped facilitate all the things that happened. But the question was, what are the competencies that the investor needs from their advisor in order for them, the investor, the client, to have a superior experience and portfolio return? And the top competency turns out to be integrity. Trustworthiness is more important than trusted.
Right.
Bernie Madoff was trusted. He wasn't trustworthy.
Right. Good point.
And there are a lot of people in the industry who frankly have achieved being trusted and then proved not to be worthy of the trust. And I wouldn't have come on, frankly. I know Scott. I know a lot of the people in his organization. I would not do this if I didn't have confidence that the host here has the integrity necessary for these listeners to benefit. So that's the big deal.
Wow. Very, very good. Mm-hmm. So take us a little bit through here as we're talking about, working with people who work with an advisor. And one of the things that, of course, the dilemmas that we face is the very thing that you teed up early here today, is when fear so grabs a hold of a client. And it is at least, and I hate to use the word this morning, impulse, but it is at least the drive of a financial advisor to stand squarely in the way of a client who is about to do the wrong thing.
Yes. Well, in fact, that gets back to Kristen's question and the whole issue of integrity. When we think of integrity, there are some competencies, behavioral competencies that are involved. So integrity is not just about not lying.
Right.
Quite truthfully, lying is as easy as not speaking. So if I never say anything, I won't have lied.
Right,
But that doesn't mean I have integrity. It just means I didn't lie. I never spoke.
Right.
So integrity means standing up for what's right. Integrity means telling the truth. Integrity means align your own behavior with moral principles and values. Integrity means keeping promises. That's about integrity. And so what the advisor needs, to Kristen's question, or what the client needs from that advisor, is somebody who has the integrity to help them make great decisions in the presence of competing and difficult to deal with emotions.
Okay, that's well said. So to your point then, if someone is really grabbed by the fear, they're ready to...
Or they're grabbed by the exuberance.
Or the exuberance. Very
Yes,
good.
yes.
Either way, and if the advisor has done a good job, because in your question about the role of the advisor, without question, until you really understand the values and the goals of your clients,
Right.
none of this works.
No.
Right.
It really doesn't work at all. You have to know, as Doug talked about, love of family, and how often that comes up when we're meeting with clients. And so to help them understand the translation of that to your actions. What does that mean if you love your family? What does that actually mean? Are you going to bring them together? In some cases, as we do the dreaming session with clients, they come up with this idea of, I hadn't really thought of it, but if I could bring my family together on this family cruise, an event that we could spend, intense time together for a week or 10 days, and something we could reflect on later, create some sort of a memory for everybody, and then you start to get that kind of alignment. And then when you start to get that fleshed out to that degree, then when someone is headed towards a direction that it is against their own goals and their own dreams, their own values.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. So it's values, reflection, goals, reflection. So when we get into the reflection that's what we should be reflecting on. Our values first,
Right.
and then our goals. Our values are more powerful in our decision-making than our goals. So the goal might be to lose weight,
Right.
but the value might be health. And if I value health, and I realize, and I've got a family history where people have died early because of weight problems and then heart problems and so on, what will get us to behave isn't the goal to lose weight, but it's the value of health.
Absolutely.
So if you reflect on health, then when the alarm goes off at 6:15, you will get up and go run because you want to be around for your children. You want to be around for your family. And you want to be around for yourself too, but
Right.
truthfully, you want to be around for
Right.
all these people. That gets back to the principle, responsibility. I have some responsibility here.
Well, and actually, for me, the personal part is if I don't, I'm a little crabby, and then I'm hard on everybody around me all day.
Well, thank you for getting up then and running.
That's right. But you're kind of an upbeat guy, right?
It happens. You get crabby anyway, And so that it's all about the immediacy as well.
Little
as the long term.
self-disclosure is good for the soul.
That is
Absolutely.
right.
So let's go back to this because I really want to wrestle a little bit more with this. When someone, as an example, we have some people, when you ask them their values, and of course they start, because they're sitting down with a financial advisor, they start so much with the finance part, and they'll say, oh, I value safety. And of course we have to take them back and say, yeah, we know you value safety, and that may be one of your key values, but getting back into the things like the family, Because what's difficult in our role, I think oftentimes, is where they will tell you originally, I value my family and I want to do these things for my family, that when the market crashes, all of a sudden they say, I value safety.
Right, well, that's right. Well, and I think Kristen values a break right now. Is that the
I think we need to take a break. Yes.
Okay, we'll get back to that right after the break. Thanks so much.
How would your financial life improve if you changed just one thing? Avoid ATM fees, make your gifts rather than buy them, protect yourself from identity theft, save more for your family's future. The list goes on. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing. Think about your finances, your lifestyle, your wants versus your needs. What one thing can you change today and see the impact tomorrow? Perhaps your family will save all your change for a month and donate it to charity. Maybe you'll finally write a will. Whether you choose to start simple or take a big step, that one thing can really make a difference. If you heard something today on financial strategies that motivates you to change one thing in your financial life, Thrivent Financial for Lutherans has free tips and resources you can use to do one thing differently. Find more at thrivent.com/one thing.
Well, welcome back. We are in studio with Financial Strategies with Scott Wardell, and we've got the guest here today, Doug Lennox.
Doug Lennox, of course, author of 5 books, and today we're really talking about behavioral finance and taking some slices out of your book, Financial Intelligence. And we've already got people that are calling the studio here for the book, so I want to make sure you're calling the right number, folks. The number to call to get a copy of Doug's book, which is called Financial Intelligence, is 1-855-346-4332. I'm going to give it to you one more time, so write it down. 1-855-346-4332. And so what we're going to do, and the reason I mentioned the locations of listeners, is that we have books available, 3 books for every location of all the 7 stations that we're on here today. So Montevideo, make sure if you are listening in any of these locations that when you leave the voice message for us with your name and your address to get a copy of this book, tell us which radio station you're listening to. Don't call the radio station. They don't have the books, but tell us which radio station. So whether you're in Montevideo, Thief River Falls, Morris, Hutchinson, Wilmer, New Ulm, or New Prague, and you don't have to be in these towns, obviously, but listening to that station, let us know which one so that we can divide them up appropriately among the 7 stations here.
Absolutely. So, why don't you give that phone number one more time?
One more time? Okay.
One more time.
It is it's a toll-free number, by the way, 1-855-346-4332. Thanks so much for listening. And here we have Doug Lennox, and we've got about 12 minutes left, so we really have got to get wrapped up here, Doug. But we were just talking before the break, and we teed up a question here, relative to when people get so grabbed by an emotion like a swinging market, all of a sudden they think sometimes that their value might have changed as well. And they'll say, well, what I really value today is safety.
Right. Well, they may value that today, and our values, the ones that matter the most to us are a little more stable.
Right.
And so the market, think of the market volatility as the outside stimulation. So the bear in the woods is the outside stimulation. The market volatility is the outside stimulation. So the first thing we want to do, and this is really now how all these skills come into play, the 4 R's.
Right.
So we talked about that earlier with Kristen. So the first thing we want to do is hit the pause button and actually recognize how we're feeling.
And that's when you're talking about the freeze moment.
Yes.
Say
and
just
name
a little
that,
more about the freeze moment.
The freeze moment literally means recognize the emotion right now. I actually carry around with me an emotion card, and it's got a whole bunch of emotions on it. And guys need this especially because they only think they're like 3 or 4 emotions. There's more than that, and a lot of people. At least one. Yeah, and a lot of people have been told to kind of repress how they feel. That actually will be counterproductive because you will feel how you feel anyway.
Right.
And it's not helpful, by the way, when somebody else tells you not to feel the way you do.
Right. Don't feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You seem upset. Don't be upset. Oh, thank you so much. You know, I was
Right.
until you mentioned that. Now that you said that,
It's all
you know,
over.
it's over. It's so, you know, thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, you seem scared. Don't be. Okay, thanks then.
Yeah.
You know, so
You
I mean,
own
that's
your
just-
emotions.
Yeah. So recognize your emotion and name the emotion. You know, if you like technical terms, it's called linguistic labeling.
Right.
Label the emotion. Name the emotion. The process of identifying the emotion engages the rational brain.
Right.
So recognize how you're feeling. Recognize what you're thinking.
Yep.
Recognize what you're doing. What's happening? My heart is starting to race. You know, I can feel my blood pressure rise. I can feel tension in my neck. I'm clenching my fist. Most people are unaware of what's going on.
Right.
And if you just pause and recognize what's going on and then reflect on the values that you thought about before,
Right.
and you said, when I went through this exercise, and there are exercises one can do. You can find them online. We have a free exercise online, our website you can use.
And give the
I know,
website address so they can go to that.
you can go to Lennox
Lennox
Aberman.
Aberman.
Yep, and
1B.
yeah, and if you
Two
yeah,
N's.
you can Google me if it's easy. If it's easier for you, just Google my name,
Yep,
Doug
Doug
Lennox.
Lennox, it'll come
You'll
up,
find
right.
up something. It'll pop it up there. And companies, including yours and others, actually use these values cards that we have.
Yep.
And so go through this values exercise individually. You
Right.
know, if you're a couple, husband and wife, you will discover your values are not identical.
Oh, yeah. It's a great exercise. I highly recommend
Right.
this. The words that my wife used after we went through this exercise is, this explains so much.
Yes, we should have done this years ago.
It was
Absolutely.
spectacular.
Oh, it's
Right.
unbelievable. And then write those values down. So, Kristen, you were talking about some of what you do, I think, off the air with your
With
own
my kids.
Yeah, with your own kids.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you should mention it. I liked it. Go ahead. Would you?
Well, absolutely. We are trying to instill in them the homework habits and the
Right.
study habits, which hopefully maybe later in life will transfer into good financial habits as well. But you know, part of that learning process was the one thing that we continue to harp on them is you have to read it, you have to hear it, you have to write it, and you have to recite it. And if you do those things over and over and over again, it will stay in your brain.
It's
Right.
absolutely true. And the neuroscience of that proves the point. So you actually are neuroscientifically sound. So
Good to know.
How cool is that? And my dad used to always say, writing is the mirror of the mind. So if you want to see your thoughts, write them down. And
Great idea. I like
yeah,
that.
because otherwise you can't see your mind.
Right.
But writing is the mirror of the mind. Writing also improves memory. Reciting, speaking out loud improves memory, and constant reflection. So write your values down and reflect on them multiple times every day. So you can use a triggering moment. I use water. So when I get in a shower, shovel snow, water plants, whatever it happens to be, whenever water touches my hands, I reflect on my values. So when when I go to the restroom in an airport or whatever,
Right.
I always wash my hands because one of my values is health. Long enough, because if you don't wash them 20 seconds, doesn't count anyway. You might as well have skipped it.
Right.
My daughter sings the ABCs.
Okay, perfect. So,
There you go.
so
Perfect
it's the
length.
same concept. So that gives you enough time. So what I do is I go right through this little routine. Love your family, be happy, seek wisdom, behave with integrity, do something of service for somebody else today, make a healthy choice. And then I glance up and look in the mirror and say, and you're making one right now.
Fantastic.
That's the routine.
Wow.
Now, people can use whatever they want, but
Right.
if they practice reflecting on what really matters to them, even if the values that they reflect on aren't relevant to the immediate circumstance, it doesn't matter. And the reason it doesn't matter is values reflection engages the rational brain.
Right.
So it allows for us to think more clearly about the problem at hand.
Yep.
So you might think, well, my values don't connect to the market crashing. Well, that's okay.
Right.
But if you reflect on your values, you'll be able to be a little more rational. You won't be any smarter than you were,
Right.
but more rational. And here's the thing. Irrational behavior trumps high IQ all the time.
Absolutely. Gosh, how many really highly intelligent people do we know or have worked with that have so much trouble making a decision?
Exactly right.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yes.
It's absolutely crazy. And I'm going to actually give one other little tip along the way here, is because when you just talked about using something you do to trigger a habit that you do, a new habit.
Yes.
And one of the things, and you and I have talked about this lightly over the years, but one of the things that I have found is that when you attach a new habit to an old habit, and that's what you have this habit of washing your hands or of touching water, and then you've attached that. And for me, the reflection of values really comes from, I had the habit of running at 6:15 or getting up at 6:15, doing my workout and doing my run, and I said to myself, I don't have enough prayer in my life. And so what I decided was I was going to attach the prayer to the workout. And then I said, I'm going to attach my values discussion to my prayer. And I'll tell you what, it makes my day. And so, we talked about getting out of bed at 6:15 to get the run. I so look forward to it because it is the best moment of my day because of this values reflection. One other thing, if I can, and that is you talked about the different emotions and reflecting on these various emotions. And one of the ones I would ask people to seek and look for and recognize when it happens to it is, today, at this moment, I feel incredibly centered. Because when people recognize this being in the zone, this centeredness, I believe that's the experience that you are trying to help them create when their goals, their beliefs, their values, and their actions are all in alignment. You have an incredible feeling, and that feeling is, I feel like myself today. So, sorry for you just get me excited, Doug, that's all.
I could go on and on, but I
Absolutely.
think I'm going to turn it to Kristen.
Well, we have
Thank you
learned
so much for being
so
here.
much here today. And Doug, thank you so much for being in the studio. I'd like us to give that phone number one last time if we can.
Absolutely. Doug's book, well, he has 5 of them, but the one that we are giving away is called Financial Intelligence. And it is about the very thing that we're talking about today, with some modeling in it as well. And
can I mention, by the way, my last book, Moral Intelligence
Absolutely.
2.0? I just want to say one quick thing.
Yes.
The first 2 words in Chapter 1 are Jim Thompson, and you can tell him Jim Thompson is with Thrivent.
Yep,
So I tell a
yep.
Jim Thompson story.
Fantastic. He's really the head of our wholesales organization.
Hope you're listening, Jim.
Yeah.
That one's for you.
Yeah, very good. So they should dial 1-855-346-4332. You're going to get a recording. Leave your name and your address. The first 3 callers in each of those listening areas will get a free copy of the book. Everyone who calls in will get a copy of our small booklet, but good booklet, called Behavioral Finance, Understanding the Human Side of Investing Can Lead to Better Decisions. Thank you to all our listeners this morning. Thank you to Doug Lennox for being part of the show and sharing your wisdom with all of our listeners.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Kristen.
you.
Thanks, Scott.